So now I'd like to start the show. And first up is Bernie Kreitzer, National Capital Trains. Bernie, if we could spot him, welcome to New Tracks Modeling. And so tell us, where are you hailing from at the moment?
National Capital Trains Company was established in 1989. At the time, we had the view that the District of Columbia and the whole general Washington, D.C. area, Virginia and Maryland, had virtually no hobby shops that dealt with scale trains. And you had to go to the traditional brick and mortar shop. The nearest one was Baltimore, and there was one in Richmond. So what we decided was we would specialize on a much more limited level because I had previous, other employment on a full-time basis. And we'd go to shows and do a little bit of mail order, mainly selling two things. One, high quality HO plastic diesels, and two, high quality N scale diesels. And we added in for the spice a little bit of narrow gauge that initially with some SN3 narrow gauge. When that died out, we carried the Blackstone models, and we were quite busy with that and sound and the like. So since then, I'd say in the last 10 years, we've been almost exclusively in scale. Perhaps in a good year, 10% of our sales are everything else, meaning HO, S gauge, and O gauge.
Are you a modeler yourself? Do you model N scale?
I have, as far as time, I'm not allowed to, it doesn't permit me to do as many things as I want, either going to shows or filling orders. But I've had two areas of model. I have a small ON3 layout that's about 2.5 by 12, which, not much is happening there. And then in N scale, we've assembled small display layouts that we use when we go to shows. In fact, one of the most effective things was probably 20 years ago. I threw some Kato Unitrack on a table, 2 loops of track, and I started to run some trains. That led to a bigger table where we could run up to 6 loops of track plus 2 trolleys, and we could run in DCC, sound, or analog. Recent times, with the availability of new products, we've set up a little 16 by 36, shelf type layout that we take to the shows. And we basically have trams on there. And the 3 curved radiuses are 7, 6, and 4 3/4. And we have found an enormous amount of interest there, with people always wanting to buy trams or minor little industrial locos. And so, we keep busy with all of those activities.
Yeah, I myself started in N scale back in 1967. It was only brought over here in this country in 1965. And in 67, it was the Aurora postage stamp. And then from there, there were Fleischmann and Arnold Rapido, and then it went to Concord, and then Atlas, and then Kato was in secret making them for Atlas, I guess. And then, of course, they introduced their own brand in the US. And I guess they're still the dominant manufacturer, I would assume. Kato is the correct.
Yes. But the interesting thing there, and my wife and I last in 2023 spent 2 weeks in Japan. And so we got to observe a lot of things. And Kato is one of the 2 largest manufacturers in Japan. The largest is a company called Tomix. They have a division that does toys, but Tomix in scale, it's probably 5 to 8 times the size of Kato. And there's also a lot of smaller companies like Green, Max, and IMAX. And it's very interesting because you have a very robust N-scale market in Japan, because there's 3 islands and 130 million people. So they have a very limited amount of space in which to do things, other than when they have clubs and dioramas. So we've now seen this, take over. We were in the first phase a number of years ago of the modules, which were the 2x4 modules, and guys would come with 30 or 40 of these things, hook them together, and run on the weekend. From there, we went to the tabletop, with the cubes that were 1.5 by 2 feet. And that is still TT, they call it, and that's extraordinarily active. Then lastly, we have little diorama type layouts, 16 by 30, 24 by 30, and people are, getting involved in those because their space is limited, or in the case, as the population gets older, a lot of people don't want to carry around 2x4 modules, so they go to either tabletop or smaller.
Yeah, I myself still have an N-Track module that I drag out once a year to a show in Indianapolis. And then they have a thing called T-Track.
Yes.
And then Cato has these little things they've made for children. We had Charlie, this marketing manager for Cato, on the show about 2 months ago. They give away these little tiny, I don't know the exact size, but they're approximately a foot by a foot. And the children put them together and link them together like a modular layout to
Yes,
try to get the
exactly.
youth in model railroading.
And it's worked in different parts of the country, and countries, I should say. In Japan, it's a tremendous success, and I often get on YouTube and I watch the Japanese train shows with English subtitles, and you see a lot of the things you've talked about. In addition to which, you have a certain amount of modules now in Great Britain and in Germany. You can't speak to China, although I'm told that there's a fairly active railroad community on the east coast of China. And there's some very good product that Bachmann makes for the Chinese market as well.
One of the major model railroading magazines, I don't recall which, in the one, I don't know if it was RMC or Model Railroader, somebody addressed the fact that micro layouts and N scale and tabletop are going to become more and more prevalent in the United States because less people are committing to these very large layouts like the one behind me that you can't see. So I think N scale has a robust future, and people like our Steve Sherrill pushing ON18, which basically runs on N scale 9mm between the rails track, has a solid future, would you say?
Yes, in fact, I had to attend a wedding that weekend, or I would come up to Steve's first meet, which was, I understand, a tremendous success, and brought up a small 16 by 30 layout. And I'll be obviously doing it in the future years as we grow this.
In Ransom, West Virginia, I made the 11-hour drive. It was a great time and a lot of micro layouts there, and just absolutely stunning models. And these Cato drives that lots of people are one of the future areas of growth for model railroading are this 3D printing of these shells that sit on mechanisms like the Cato drive. There's some number, I can't recall the numbers, like 571 or whatever the drive is, but they're bulletproof drives. I mean, Cato will run and run and run and run forever. They're just super high quality.
That in fact, you just captured the next statement I was going to make with these small drives. Cato is the leader. Tomex is not far behind. In Tomex's case, they make a load of different diesels and a load of different streetcars, and then they sell the drive separately. So somebody can, buy the engine for 20 or 30 bucks in Japan, dollars equivalent in yen equivalent, and then later they can buy this drive for a few dollars.
A lot of people are doing that in the U.S. and Tomex. I didn't know. I've seen some Cato structures, pre-assembled structures. I mean, I'm not in buying anything in N scale anymore, but I see Tomex. I see that name on some of the Cato structures. So maybe they're I don't know. You don't see a lot of Tomex in the U.S. unless it's through Cato, I think. I don't know if they have a handshake or no.
No, that's not the relationship. Tomex has an exclusive with Walthers. Walthers is the exclusive distributor. Cato USA, which is a subsidiary of the parent, Cato Japan, they operate through 5 or 6 U.S. distributors, and they do some direct sales of parts, special diesels cooked with sound.
Well, let's take a quick look at your website and just peruse the. Can everybody see that? Everybody see that website? Yes? No? I need somebody to,
Yes,
Too
yeah.
small, too small.
it's small. Okay, I have it full screen here. Um, let me try again here. One moment. Any better?
Hit the three dots on the upper right and you can blow it. Yeah, the three dots and it says get the zoom it to about down to about 150%. There you go.
Mhm.
No,
How's that?
you won't be able to, yeah, that's good.
Okay. So, Bernie, basically you say 90% of your sales are N scale. Let's just take a walk through. I know you don't have any photos on here, but let's just talk in general. So these are the brands, the Kato and Atlas are the primary two brands right now that you carry. Is that correct?
Yes, I also carry smaller amount of Broadway Limited, which does both HO and N scale, and they do very good, particularly some of the steam engines that Broadway has brought out that not only have DCC and sound, but actually have steam smoke. And they're quite good. And then Rapido does excellent work. He's primarily an HO, but when he does something in N scale, it's terrific. I said as an example, when he did the Canadians, he used FP9s for all phases, early, modern, and then, the Via. And those cars are like a work of art.
Now, I assume Kato makes everything in Japan, and
Yes,
Atlas is probably China, would be my guess, right?
yes.
And Broadway Limited, I know, is China, right?
Yeah.
But what is Fox Valley Models?
Fox Valley basically was sold to a company called Scale Trends, another small but super high quality outfit. They bring in a large amount of HO and a smaller amount of N scale. Their workmanship is incredible. They started out in both HO and N scale by doing the Pearl 3-unit Union Pacific Big Blow turbine, which is, a phenomenal model. All these guys over the years who paid $2,000-3,000 for a brass one in HO. You look at this one, and it's just as detailed and it operates.
And the N scale steam locomotives, I know Bachmann made a lot of those too. You're not carrying Bachmann or no?
They carry them, but when you come to having a choice, and particularly when you're talking about some of the items that are out of China, if I pay X, somebody's going to pay X minus or X minus minus. So you never know what happens because there's such huge volumes that if there's any surplus, they just have a massive sale and the price, plunges. Whereas Atlas, you don't have that problem, nor Microtrains, which is US,
Yeah.
nor Kato.
Let's talk a minute about the N scale brass. Um,
Glad you should mention that.
it's not coming up. I thought I was looking at that earlier today, but what I was shocked is that, yeah, here they are. I was thinking that some of these didn't look too bad for brass. 275 for a brass Mikado is, I mean, for a brass locomotive, that's pretty reasonable, I think. Yeah.
Yes, most of the brass was done first in Japan, and the company KMT did it for Hallmark. Then Hallmark shifted to Korea, and then Key Imports, who did loads of HO&O, got involved and built some really outstanding models for the Pennsylvania Railroad and steam, as well as a GG1. And they did a phenomenal amount of Pennsylvania and Southern Pacific models. So if the guy wanted to model all the cab forwards, you could get those, or you wanted to model the top Pennsy locomotives, the 4464 or the 6446. You had a tremendous opportunity to get them. The good thing was that they were generally accurate, and they most of them had very good paint. The more drawback is that you had to do a lot of tinkering with the mechanism to get it up to the point where it might compete with a Kato model. Now, that was when they came.
Yeah.
This was in the late 90s, and maybe it was all done by about 2002.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, most of those models are The newest models are probably around 20 years old. Most of them are in the 30 and 40-year age.
So these aren't necessarily new. They are new production runs. They are maybe new in the box, but some of them are older, you're saying, yeah?
Yeah, 80–90% of what I have sold in N-scale brass was new in the box. There were shelf coins, to be, very candid.
Are the Koreans still making brass locomotives?
Yeah, they still are, but the prices have become so prohibitive. And that comes from essentially the demand for any type of skilled labor where somebody can fabricate this and they can solder, where they shipped over to the high-tech industries, we even do value added, in electronics or other industries.
Does Japan still make brass locomotives?
Yeah, they make a small amount. In my trip to Japan, I was able to locate, the traditional builder, Kasumi. They still do models. So if you wanted an HO, a model of the D51 Mikado, which is one of the prevalent steam locomotives, or the C Hudson class, or the 280, you could get one with fully equalized drive, but you may be paying in US dollars $2,500 for it, or the top express, Japanese bullet trains. They had them and they were exquisite in brass with phenomenal paint jobs, but you're going to be paying enormous dollars.
So it's safe to say that the high-end N scale is pretty much like the high-end Lionel. They're making exquisite locomotives, but you're paying for it. Yeah?
Yeah, I would say in the steam locomotives,
Yeah.
the highest end in N scale has been something like the Broadway Big Boy, the Broadway Reading T1, and the NNW 2882. Then Kato is stepped it one level above that. They've done the Union Pacific Big Boy, Union Pacific FEF3 in both the black and the excursion, and they've done the GS4 Daylight when matching passenger cars.
Mhm.
Those models, I would say, are probably the pinnacle. With the Big Boy having two motors, and it has the ability to pull up to 15 pounds of weight.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just intricate engineering. And those of you who like to, look at the YouTube late at night, and when everybody's asleep, you can get on the YouTube and Google and just say Kato N scale or Kato Big Boy, and you can see some incredible videos.
Is Microtrain still the king dog in making N-scale freight cars?
They're among the top ones.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to retain their position because many of the freight cars outside of the ones that Tomex and Kato make are going to be coming out of China, and the price on those will go up more.
The Microtrains are still made in, where is it, Portland?
Oregon. Yeah, in Oregon.
Yeah.
And they're terrific, and they do a really good job. And the paintwork and lettering are exquisite. You can't beat the laser applied graphics they do.
I have probably 200 of them. And then the passenger cars, I have a lot of Kato ones. Looks like Atlas was making a passenger car now. Is that right?
Everybody makes small runs. Rapido has tried a couple. Microtrains now pretty much does the heavyweights. Broadway is getting into it a little bit over time. And then Kato makes what they call the name trains. And those would be a 10-car Southern Pacific Daylight. You could add, the 2-car add-ons. City of Los Angeles, 11-car. Broadway Limited, 10 cars with a 4-car add-on. Super Chief, California Zephyr, and the list goes on. And those items you can never keep in stock. And the amount of people who love those and just run those. And there's a few guys who display them, but the main thing here is that the bulk of my customers in N-scale, and I see them regularly, either at a show or I talk to them on the phone and run into them. They use this stuff. They operate. They might only have a space 4x8, but they run, beautiful layouts, 2 or 3 train. They do a heck of a lot of work and are very excited about it. And that's been one of the things that has really attracted me over the years to N-scale. It's a level of excitement that I haven't seen matched except for maybe HO in the early 1950s.
I mean, I'm looking at this with wide open eyes. I honestly didn't know that Microtrains made a passenger car and they made a heavyweight passenger car. The heavyweights that I have are the older, they're not so detailed, in N scale. I can't remember who made them, but they were okay. But I'm sure if Microtrains make them, I'm sure they knock your eyes out. Is that right?
Yes, in fact, they just came in today, a circus train called Straits Circus, 5-car set with observation and the other items. They've also made some, really good sets in Pennsylvania, Baltimore, and Ohio. And sometimes when those things are popular, they add an extra car. But you get the baggage or the baggage mail. You get a couple of a diner, and you get a couple of coaches, and you get an observation. And people love that. I mean, the railroads like Penn Central, Amtrak, Pennsylvania, Santa Fe, they're just extraordinarily popular.
I have to say, I don't think the pricing's all that bad for this stuff. I mean, you get a whole set for $125. That's pretty reasonable,
Yeah, I think so.
I think N scale's alive and well. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you something now that I've noticed over 35 years. In the times we've had some economic concerns in this country, or there were recessions, my
Yeah.
train business and some of my colleagues has just kept going, and sometimes it's going even better than when there's full-time prosperity, because people will always be at home. They may not be able to afford the big vacation or the car, but they will be able to afford reasonably priced, high-quality trains.
There's always room for trains and restaurants.
Exactly.
Well, this
Exactly.
Well, this has been really interesting for me because as a past N scaler, it was a real eye opener that I mean, overall things are priced pretty reasonable. There's a sneaky brass locomotives in there; they're priced reasonable, and then the fact that Cato, uh, is still a strong player, and Broadway Limited dabbles in it. I mean, it has reason to be the number 2 scale and continue that position, and it's going to grow because if the magazines are correct, people don't necessarily have room for these massive layouts anymore.
Yeah, Tom Olive. And 2 things, and I'll close. One of the fastest growing segments that I have is I bring in from Japan directly a load of Kato built Japanese name trains, locomotives, diesels, cars, etc. And they make phenomenal European trains like the French high speed, the German high speed. It's amazing the amount of interest in the world because people have traveled so much. And then lastly, it's always my pleasure, like tonight, to participate first with Jim Kello and now with you. And I'm always here, available if anybody has questions, or if the group needs any support in any area. I'm more than glad to do that.
Well, thank you for your participation this evening, and would like to have you on again. And we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you. Be well.